Welcome to another amazing episode of Roll or Die. Today, I get the opportunity of doing the introduction because I see this guy often at G-Force. He is the second coach, or second in command coach at G-Force. He's a no-gi specialist, and he is Halis Erciyas. Welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you guys for having me. It's
Awesome.
a huge, huge honor and pleasure.
Man, so you were scrolling back through a couple of our episodes, hey, and you thought we're up to some good stuff.
Yeah, you guys are doing some amazing stuff, some familiar faces, some key figures in the jiu-jitsu community all across Australia. So
Yeah.
really appreciate what you guys are doing.
Cheers,
Thank
brother.
you. Thank you. So, you Anton forgot to mention that you are a black belt.
Oh yeah.
So how long have you been training, Halis? Tell us about how you got started in jiu-jitsu.
I'd say my grappling journey started when I first started high school at the age of 13. I was fortunate enough to have a wrestling team at the high school that I was going to at the time. And I was never one of those kids who got into the soccer or football, whereas everyone else in my class, I remember they just, recess lunch, get that ball out, and they just start playing. Um, and then I had a friend who approached me and he said, "Look, I'm part of the wrestling team. I think you'd really like it." So that's how I got introduced to it, and the rest is history. I've been grappling, doing wrestling from the age of 13 up until I found the jiu-jitsu. And I found jiu-jitsu because I was looking actually for another wrestling gym,
Hmm.
and there's less of them and they're
Yeah.
further away. And this was a time when jiu-jitsu was really growing, around 2014. So I found the Big G and I've been with him since.
Amazing. So
Wh-
you are the only person we've ever had on the show who did not find BJJ through the UFC. I think you're the first.
Yeah. Because I was into wrestling first, and believe it or not, doing wrestling when I was younger, I had, I think, one or two friends around year 9 who were doing jiu-jitsu, and I'd wrestle with them and stuff. And I always found it like coming from wrestling, it was more of a sport, whereas I was taken back with, let's say, the brutality of jiu-jitsu
Hmm.
and how severely damaging it can be. And imagine in high school, like we weren't too fond of tapping or giving up.
Yeah.
So damage could be done, you know.
That's interesting because I mean, jiu-jitsu translates to the gentle art, and I think wrestling is far more brutal. But you think the other way around. Why is that?
So wrestling, think of it like an arm wrestle. It's brutal in the sense of you got to be at your peak strength, athleticism. It's a body versus body. Whereas in an arm wrestle, it's arm versus arm,
Mm.
and the stronger wrestler will definitely win. Whereas in jiu-jitsu, now I agree with what you're saying. It's a gentle art in the sense of you don't need to necessarily be as strong or as fit. If you've got the technical knowledge, you can achieve the outcome you desire. Um, and the reason why back then I thought it was more brutal was again because of, you're breaking bones, you're choking people out. Whereas in wrestling, that would be more of a byproduct of the wrestle, but it wasn't intended to do. Whereas in jiu-jitsu, your intention is to try and go and break those limbs, break those joints.
Yes. Interesting.
And that's where I was thinking of back then. But now that I've been doing jiu-jitsu for so long, obviously there's a respect. You respect the tap, and if you've got good training partners, it's something you can do even through to old age. Whereas
Absolutely.
wrestling, maybe not
Look
so
at me,
much.
man. I'm a crusty old man still doing it. Absolutely. Yeah. Now
Yeah.
that actually leads me to like let's look at this through the other lens. So you thought jiu-jitsu was brutal and you didn't discover it through MMA. When you first then started to see MMA and what that was about, what did you think of MMA? Did you think, wow, that's not that's even more brutal, or what was your thoughts about MMA as
Well,
you
MMA definitely more brutal than wrestling.
Mhm.
You'd have people bloody, and especially researching into the beginning of UFC, pulling hair, broken teeth, especially before some of the rules were implemented about, no striking in the back of the head and
Mm.
knees to a grounded opponent. It was brutal. It was
Mm.
very, very brutal. And it probably is still one of the most brutal sports,
I
you
agree.
know.
For
Yeah.
sure.
But jiu-jitsu made the brutal aspect of MMA look more tame, because you'd have guys, especially on the earlier days, like they'd tap to a submission because they've acknowledged that they've been defeated in that moment. But as soon as the grappler who was applying the submission lets go of the submission, their mind would just switch and they wouldn't want to accept defeat again. It's like, I'm not
Mm.
harmed, I'm not bleeding, nothing's broken, you know.
I do. And then
So
sometimes they
I
even
guess
try to
it
start to
tamed
restart the fight. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like it's tamed the MMA aspect as well. So that's why, again, that's why it's coined the gentle art, I
Mm.
believe.
Yeah. I want to go back a step. When you said that you started wrestling in school, was that in Melbourne? Because I didn't
Yes, I
know
was
there
in
was much
Melbourne.
of that here in Australia in schools.
Yeah, so I was fortunate. So the school I went to back then, it was called Usher College, and it was a prominently Turkish school. And there was a sports teacher who, again, his job was PE, and he would run the soccer team. But he, being from Turkey, he had a strong understanding of wrestling, and he grew up with a lot of wrestlers uh, from where he was from. And out of the generosity of his kindness, out of his own generosity, he started the wrestling team there, and he'd coach us. Like, I remember we were training four days a week. It'd be after school, and I remember Saturday, Sunday mornings. And not only that, he'd go above and beyond, and he would take us interstate to compete. So we'd compete locally and would compete interstate. And I believe he would approach the actual school for funding for this, as well as obviously where our parents would have um, chipped in as well.
Mm.
But it was driven by this one amazing coach. His name
Wow.
was Mehmet, and I still love and respect him.
Mm. I often
Ah.
think about that. Like it just takes one amazing person in a community to cause a lot of like goodness. And if those people aren't there, you can imagine like there'd be an alternate universe where you never studied wrestling, then you never studied jujitsu. And I see the work you do with it, but you're a great coach and you got a lot of
I,
knowledge, which I'm keen to tap into today. But all of that happened because of one Turkish PE teacher, right? That's pretty cool.
yeah, yes, pretty much. And I guess growing up, seeing what he's done for, I guess, the small grappling community that we had then, it's inspired me to do what I'm doing now. Like, and I can't picture myself after doing all that wrestling, living without some type of grappling in my life. And that's where jiu-jitsu came in again. I was yearning for more grappling, looking for wrestling. I found jiu-jitsu, and it was the best thing ever.
Mm, awesome.
If I could go back, I wouldn't change it.
Out of interest, has wrestling grown at the same sort of pace in recent years as jiu-jitsu has, would you say?
No, no. In my
Mm.
opinion, jiu-jitsu has got potential to be the next taekwondo in Australia. And taekwondo is like huge, but wrestling,
Mm,
you got gyms popping up, you got black belts wanting to open up gyms, and UFC making people around the world aware of this submission grappling, and
mm,
it's got potential to be just as big as
mm.
Mm.
Submission
karate and
grappling,
taekwondo. Sorry.
they don't really talk about it as submission grappling though. They always talk about it as jiu-jitsu. Like correct me if I'm wrong, but I think judo is shrinking. Wrestling may be growing slightly, and BJJ is growing rapidly. Is that fair to say? Do we all agree that that's the case?
I wouldn't agree, because looking at the Olympics, until something like jiu-jitsu or submission grappling gets into the Olympics, I wouldn't want to rule out judo.
Okay.
You know, it's
Yeah.
got a prestige to it, and having come across some people who have done judo, their stand up with the gi is just
Oh.
paramount.
As a
You
martial
know,
art, I'm not saying it's a bad martial art. Judo is so good, but as like a community, it's not growing, is it? I don't know. I don't think it's growing.
I don't know enough about judo.
Okay.
yeah, I didn't dabble into the community of judo too much, so I wouldn't know either, except watching what I watch online and the Olympics and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah. I'm also a bit undecided about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to the Olympics because I feel like when judo did that, it changed that a lot. I'm not sure if it is. And the other thing too, as much as Australia's really improved on the scene, I think the reality is that the US and Brazil are still the two front runners in the jiu-jitsu world, wouldn't you say? Like in an Olympic sport, there would be the two of them and maybe a couple of other countries that might be in the running. At this stage, I don't know that we're quite ready for it to be in the Olympics. That's just my 2 cents. What do you think, Halis?
Are you definitely correct in the sense that, Brazil and the US is in the forerunning, but there's also the UAE, you got
Mm.
the ADCC, which some people equate to the Olympics of grappling.
Mm.
Yeah.
Albeit there's no gi in it, it's more of a submission grappling, and they welcome all grapplers. And thankfully for us, it's primarily the jiu-jitsu practitioners who excel in that.
That's a good point. Might be a good chance to segue into some of your knowledge. So you've done a lot of reffing, right? You sent us some photos. I could probably share them on the screen, and I might do that shortly. But yeah, like how many comps do you reckon, or how many times have you reffed? How long have you been reffing for? Tell us a bit about that.
I started, so COVID 2019, 2020, and then just as the tournaments were starting up again after the local lockdowns, that's when I started refereeing. And since then, I've been refereeing at nearly all the competitions that I've been invited to. I don't think to this day, actually one or two I would have declined if there was clashes with my schedule, but majority of them I've been refereeing at.
Yeah, right. And
Yeah, there's one.
something you're passionate about, super passionate about, of course.
Yes.
And what makes you passionate?
It's again like I love grappling. Like I got the bug at that young age and I can't get rid of it. Like speaking about that, I've got for the first time, I'm going into a surgery in 2 weeks, and I'm just dreading the thought of not being able to grapple for some time. I'm dreading it. So I'm
Yeah.
trying to get as much grappling as I can in now before then, and then hopefully it'll be enough to allow me to rest after that.
What surgery can you share or
Um,
not keen to tell the
I
world?
I I could share. The cause is really unknown, but they could say due to trauma, maybe due to grappling. But I've got something called a hydrocele in my private area, and one of my jewels are very, very, very large, and it needs to be fixed.
Wow.
Sorry, I shouldn't have gone there.
It's better that one of your jewels is very large than very small, bro.
Yeah.
All right. So
So,
so with this, like what the reason why I wanted to have this like have you on the show so desperately is because you just started talking the other day. We were doing a private group that we get together at GeForce and we just kind of break down stuff. And you started talking about what you witness when you're reffing about the no gear game. And Kim is very like she's always on this. She always wants to know people's views about where things are headed, right? And I love that she asked those questions. But what I'd like to hear from you is what do you see is happening a lot right now? Well, let's start with just right now, or maybe the past, and then the present, and then the future. But don't rush, okay? Because I really want to see what you've observed over time as far as no gi competition and what is actually working at the moment. How do you see the matches finishing and talk a bit about that?
so when Nogi started really being more prominent was with the leg locks, and that was around what 2016, 17, or even before maybe. But it allowed the no gi scene to grow because it wasn't welcomed in the gi scene, you know. And obviously in competition, it's for the safety of the athletes. No reaping, no heel hooks, those type of things. To the point where people were doing it in no gi, and it is relatively safer in no gi too. If you think about it, there's less friction when the legs are entangled. People aren't wearing gi pants. So it is safer in that sense as well. It's easier to escape as opposed to if someone was wearing gi pants. And on that point, you could actually say like Eddie Bravo, he love the leg stuff. And he was smart enough to know he openly says his favorite attire is a rash guard top and gi pants, knowing very well that the gi pants will help him hold those leg entanglements.
Interesting.
You know, so there are people way before, like when I was blue or even white, like they knew what was coming. And because of people like that, we have the no-gi scene now. And with the introduction of everyone, or most people wanting to dabble in leg locks, it just grew. And then you've got tournaments dedicated just to no-gi as opposed to gi and no-gi. And not only that, it's actually grown the no-gi scene in the gi tournaments as well. You know, if you look into IBJJF, they allow reaping brown to black, and they allow heel hooks. Albeit they don't let the scissor takedown still, but that's even illegal in judo. It's very, very dangerous on the knee because you got your whole body weight dropping on someone's knee, and you can do a lot of damage, and it's hard to control in a combat sport.
What advice would you give to people, like to competitors, when they're, as a referee? I know we've had other referees on in the past. For instance, they'll say, like, know the rule set, because there are different rule sets for different competitions. Like, what other sort of advice would you give to people maybe going into their first competition, or even people who've done it for a while?
Being familiar with the rule set is very, very important, especially if you compete in different types of tournaments, because there is subtle details that do change. For example, in grappling industry, you're allowed to reap blue belt and up, and if you don't know the rule set and you've just focused more on IBJJF where you're trying not to reap, it's going to hinder your performance. So you want to make the most of the rule set that you're competing in and get the advantage that's been given to you. And in turn, that will help develop the sport so that the people that are competing, they're going to be forced to develop the proper technique and the defenses for these types of moves.
So is the leg entanglement game still where it's at for no-gi? Like, I want to keep going down this rabbit hole because like you got to a point where you started talking about where it's going to evolve to next, right? So like, is the leg entanglement game still winning matches at ADCC level, for example, at grappling industries, wherever you ref? Like, I know you're not reffing at ADCC stuff, but yeah, is it still the game? Is it still the game to play?
It's a tough question, but from what I've witnessed, more people are comfortable with leg entanglements like they were with any upper body submissions and attacks than ever before. And I feel you will see matches where someone has a game plan, just pull guard, enter the legs, and they can finish it quickly, just like people were doing at the introduction of leg locks. But that being said, you'll come across people now, because of how aware people are with leg locks, that they'll be defending that game. So then they're forced to go to plan B or plan C, which can go back to the upper body or to the back or enter another leg. And I feel where we're at now with submission grappling and jiu-jitsu is we are seeing the bigger picture. Again, I could be wrong in this, but majority of the human body and submissions have been explored. Now you'll see like new types of locks or new ways to do things, but they're short-lived. Nothing's really boomed as much as it has when leg locks first came into the game. And one of the best examples, or the introducing leg locks to jiu-jitsu scene, is the likes of if I might be pronouncing this wrong, but Imanari. And he was asked about this years ago, and he said, why should I put in effort and bother to pass someone guard when their legs are right there and I can go break their legs? And people are understanding this more. And famously said by, I think, Dean Listener, when he was speaking with John Danaher, he said to him, why ignore half the human body? And now we're at a time where everyone's exploring all aspects of the human body and how they can, again, coming back to the brutality comment earlier on, how to inflict as much harm and damage as they can to all aspects of the body. So you know, unless someone grows a new limb, I don't think we're going to come up with many new huge grappling revolutions as we've come to today.
Okay, I like that.
So what then would you say what's next? Then where, where can especially no-gi grappling go? What do you see in the future?
So people are threatening leg locks, and in turn getting their opponents to expose their backs. So it goes through threatening leg locks. If they're clearing the knee line, you've got an opportunity there to hunt the back. So you could say it's coming full circle in the sense of you submit, you go for the upper body. Someone defending the upper body has to posture, exposing their legs, leaving their legs behind. No one can posture out without leaving their legs behind, unless they're levitating or flying out of the grappling match. But then that leaves their legs behind. And then if someone's trying to spin and clear the knee line, there's a brief window there, they're exposing their back. And then from back, you want to take your back to the mat or hide your back from your opponent, and you're back to the upper body. So it's just coming round and round.
Nice.
I'd say upper body, legs to back, so upper body, legs to back.
Amazing. So people are going to have to become proficient at the chains between all of those sections in a full circle. And then they'll be like, one of the things you talked about the other day, and this is only because I'm relatively new to this, but I also see it in talking in MMA commentary and places like that. But it's a race, right? Like at the start of a position, the attacker might be winning that position. Now, there's a point in the position where the attacker is no longer winning. So can you talk through like an example of a race to be in the winning position through a sequence? Because yeah, it kind of blows me away. Like I had never, until you started talking about this stuff, I hadn't really thought about it fully.
This comes with more and more experience grappling, where I'm still learning heaps, and I've gotten to a point personally where I'm putting more effort in learning so that I can coach others more, as opposed to doing it myself. But what I'm seeing is the person who recognizes when they've escaped the position sooner and be more of the offensive mindset is going to have the dominant end of that exchange. So the way you asked it was, just as much as the person escaping needs to understand that point where they've actually freed themselves of a pin, the guy doing the pin, hunting that submission, should also be able to recognize just as quickly when that person they're pinning has escaped, so that they can aptly defend. If they don't defend properly in time, they can get caught out by the guy that's just escaped that position.
I see.
And there are a lot of exchanges or sequences that can show this. One that I was actually looking into yesterday was escaping the rear body lock. And I was just astonished with it because, again, we don't see it as much unless you're watching the high level. And like from a simple body lock, you can get a butterfly hook in and instigate a roll. And in turn, because you're the guy that's got the body lock from the back and they're on top, they don't want to concede top position. So they have to sprawl out. They sprawl, even if they refuse to give out the body lock, they sprawl out with their legs. And with that roll, you can enter into the legs straight away. So there's a reverse transition, I guess, from having your back taken, you're entering the legs. And again, it's because you need to recognize when, okay, I am at this point safe and I've got something within my reach to grasp. And you want to capitalize on that. And those windows, as people get more and more experience in grappling, just get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller.
Wow.
So it's a bit of a scary thought, because if people grapple too conservatively, it's not as entertaining for the viewers and it becomes a slower match. So there's a lot to consider. And I guess that's up to the tournament makers to set the rules in a way where it promotes movement and also rewards risk. Because in some of these exchanges, you need to take a little bit of risk to have that opportunity of attack. If someone's got me in side control and they're just stalling, they're not looking to progress, what's also going to motivate me to try and properly escape? Because if I try and escape, I might expose something and, you know, give up my back if I try to turtle out. And it's just, every time I think about it, it's just amazing. It's so dynamic and there's so much to think about. And I've had people come to me and say they love jiu-jitsu because of the level of intellect it also requires, as opposed to some other striking martial arts. Not taking anything away from striking martial arts, you know, there's a level of intellect you need for that as well. But I feel like grappling and submission grappling and Brazilian jiu-jitsu is just at another level with, you know, what can you think up, then what can you physically do?
Amazing.
And
I
you
hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. Thank you, brother.
You mentioned before the show, like the some other people, like you were talking about other people. Who can you name any sort of up and comers that you know of, like you're seeing on the competition scene, who either we could have on this show or just who generally, you know, to our viewers and our listeners?
I'm not really good with names. The best thing I could recommend is just source out who's winning the local tournaments and who's on the podium consistently, because you will see a lot of names coming up in that way, and just probably inviting them just to see their thoughts from the athlete's perspective and what they may think about the rule sets and which rule sets they prefer. And you'll see a lot of like jiu-jitsu is relatively large in Australia, but in the competition scene, you're going to see familiar faces across all the different types of competitions. You know? So again, I'm so sorry. I'm not the best with names.
No, that's fine, man. I actually like it because it's like teaching us how to fish, not giving us the fish in some ways. And I think that's good too, you know. I wonder, like, you haven't competed, I think you were telling me, since 2018, something like that.
2018, 2019, yeah. So 2018 was my successful jiu-jitsu year.
Yeah.
At Purple Belt though.
Okay, cool. So you haven't competed, yeah, and that is interesting. Like, how do you reconcile that? I think we talked about it a little bit. I think you said you go to win. That's what you do, and you obviously don't think you can win right now, or is that not the case?
Not the condition. I mean, like I was last week I was grappling with someone in Australia who is, I believe, at a very high level, and just simple stuff like I know what needs to be done, but I haven't got that same agility or speed that they might have. And an example of this is we were just he was in a knee shield position, and I knew I needed to close the gap, clear that knee shield, and try to get chest to chest. And I found an opening, I went for it, but he was just so quick to the point where like he got his knee back up and over my head to the point where like he whacked my nose across with his knee.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking if I was versing someone else that wasn't at his caliber, like I would have easily won that exchange. But they're just so quick now, you know. And I wouldn't want to compete unless I'm at that level too.
Yeah. So does that mean you're retired? Are you already retired? Is that what's going on here?
I wouldn't say retired, but I'd say I'm focusing more on the community scene, helping the community grow, making more people aware of jiu-jitsu, helping with the refereeing, helping with the coaching, just facilitating the community through other ways rather than competing.
Amazing. I should probably do that too. You should see me compete.
And I guess the inspiration for that is from my wrestling coach. You know, it's still amazing what he did. I remember he used to drive us in his own car all around Victoria. Sometimes he'd hire us a bus just to get us, you know, towards Sydney or Adelaide. And it was incredible.
That's so cool, man.
Is he still coaching now? Do you know?
He approached me once before if he could do coaching at G-Force, and I offered it to him. I spoke with Big G, but he went back at it, and he's not coaching as far as I'm aware. He's still a teacher though, and on the side he just works at a market selling some food.
Wasted
It seems
talent,
a big loss. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's true. Like some people end up on the scrap heap, don't they? Even when they've been amazing contribution. I don't mean that that's actually a really bad thing to say. But in comparison to what this guy could be doing, like the world tends to use people like consumables in some way, shape, or form, right? But this is a guy. Actually, Big G is the same. I see Big G take people on road trips to comps all the time.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Parents and their kids. So that stuff is alive and well. But yeah, it's a shame that people who are willing and able don't. There's no spot. Sometimes it's like I hope that guy finds his place, man. And you're obviously a massive contribution to those around you. And it's like this. I got personally where I'm at right now is I feel like I got what I needed to get from you out of this show, man. Because like the way that you talk about the game, and where actual specific positions and that those micro battles that happen. That's what like I wake up thinking about stuff that you've been saying, man. And it's like I wanted to just get some of that stuff out there in the community. So thank you very much from me.
One thing I found though with, the finer details in grappling is it's not palatable for everyone. So like as a coach, I have to tailor the way of teaching to the students. And like some people, they just want those little details. I want to understand the reasoning behind why the leverage that they acquire through what they do. But then you've got others that just want to see the bigger picture and they just do it, And when you start getting into the little details of it, they literally like they zone out. They zone out. They don't consume anything of it.
Yeah.
So I'm one of the ones where I love the details. Yeah, just studied design, and with the studying of design that I did and the grappling that I've done, like they just come hand in hand. I look at grappling as an art, as a form, and it's yeah, I love it. Like I don't know what else to say. I can't see myself not having some type of grappling in my life.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. I think we're nearly out of time. Do you have any words to round it off, Alice? Any parting thoughts for our listeners?
On the comment about community, like I'd want to use this opportunity to thank everyone in the community. All those coaches who are constantly bringing students to competitions, all those competition organizers. I'd like to thank Big G for facilitating my jiu-jitsu career up until now and all the opportunities that he's presented me with. And people in my smaller circle, the guys that I train with, there's, the likes of Big G, one of them, you guys at the gym. But then I've got friends that, believe it or not, these guys are the ones I used to do wrestling with at our high school, which is the likes of, you got Shamil Ablahan. I don't know if you heard of him. And there's also Siraj Sufi. These guys
weapon
are just amazing, and these guys they're coaching now and they're aspiring to still compete. Sham is my age. He's focusing on coaching, but he's recently been telling me he just wants to really compete. And Suraj is younger and he's got huge potential. If he does hear this, I'll tell him just go for it, man, before the years catch up.
Awesome.
And yeah, just a big thank you to everyone in the community.
So great. So great.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for being on the show, man. Kim, I hope you got what I got out of this guy.
Yes, no, that was great. Thank you so much for giving up your time. And yeah, we will have this episode out in a couple of weeks. So yeah, we look forward to seeing you on the mats.
Thank you guys for having me. Again, it is a huge honor.
Thanks, Halis. You rock, bro.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.